Catherine Harrington. I'm joined by Commissioners Roy Rogers, Vice Chair Nafisa Fai, Commissioners Pam Treese and Jerry Willey. We are all decked out in orange to commemorate, is it Public Works? Go Orange Day for safety for road operations tomorrow. So everybody, please make sure, just like every other day of the year, you should be yielding to all of the construction workers out on our roadways, not only tending to our roads and sidewalks and bike lanes, but also those who are trying to build buildings in our community and need to move different equipment, as well as for our agriculture industry. So we have a full agenda today. First, I want to checkpoint and see if anyone has any questions on today's formal business agenda. You have something?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Harrington. Good morning, everyone. I do have a question about an agenda item that's under the consent agenda, and this is the from the Department of Finance, presented by Greg Munn.
Item number 10.
Item number 10.
Memorialize the Board of Commissioners' direction on the funding of key capital improvement projects.
Yes.
You have a question? Ask it, please.
I have questions for Greg Munn.
Ms. Angie can handle those.
Hold on. So I had two questions for you, Tanya. First question is, I had a question about how we can memorialize today a reallocation of ARPA funds conversation that's supposed to happen in July. And then the second question I had about that agenda item was, if we decide this today, does that mean we are binding ourselves for the reallocation to cover the cost of the critical facilities in the ERP?
No.
I see you shaking your head.
Yeah. So let me clarify. The reallocation will be coming to your board for ARPA dollars. Currently, staff are working on really firming up what has been spent with ARPA and what is still outstanding. We need to ensure that by the end of this calendar year that we have obligated all of those funds. So staff are working, I will use the word feverishly, to then work with your board steering committee, which consists of Chair Harrington and Commissioner Willey, to bring back a reallocation. I believe it's scheduled for July for that conversation. One of the potentials of reallocation, because the costs have came in higher for HVAC and the related ARPA eligible projects to the critical facilities, ARPA could be a funding source, but that would be based on your board's reallocation direction and further information coming to your board in July.
So what was explained at the January roundtable and that this worksheet highlights is that it will only work more in our favor as opposed to our detriment.
Okay.
Any other questions? I will note that we have two proclamations, one of which the board will be participating in, and you should have a sheet at your desk for that. All right. Next, we'll move on to the second agenda topic for our team to present applicants for the Behavioral Health Council. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you. Good morning, Chair Harrington, Board of Commissioners. My name is Mira Samantel. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Director of Health and Human Services. And as the chair said, we are here today for a brief work session recommending applicants for the Behavioral Health Council for an action item that would come back to you on May 7th. So I will turn it over to Nick O'Cone.
Good morning, Chair Harrington. Good morning, Commissioners. As Mira mentioned, my name is Nick O'Cone. I'm the Division Manager with Behavioral Health, and I'll be here talking really briefly about our Behavioral Health Council applicants and some recommendations to your board for appointment. Slide. No. All right. All right.
I have it right here, Nick, if you need it.
Oh, no, it's great.
You do have like 3 or 4 slides.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You-
I'll
there
just
is a
do that.
slide
Totally okay.
presentation.
Yeah.
It's in the packet.
Yeah.
Well, I will just walk through what I have in front of me and you have the slides in front of you and we'll go from there. So today's presentation, we're going to just do a really brief overview. I have them right here as well.
Okay.
Thank you. Of our council. We'll talk a little bit about our 2024 recruitment and then just make some quick recommendations for appointments. I don't know why I'm still holding the clicker.
Welcome to Tuesday morning. We're with ya.
So our Behavioral Health Council is a 19-member board and commission that advises our Behavioral Health Division and provides an independent voice to the Board of Commissioners about the behavioral health needs of our community. Several of the positions that we have on our board are identified for specific positions, system partners, et cetera, and other positions that we have are for consumer advocates or what we call members at large. The priorities on our board always is to be able to elevate consumer voice, to really hear from our community about what the behavioral health needs are, and then to also be reaching into the community to make sure that we are as representative as possible and to be increasing the diversity of the voices on our board also. Look at that. Click. All right. For our 2020,
Quick question.
yeah.
Is the formation of the Behavioral Health Council directed by ORS?
It is
Okay.
Oregon revised statutes. We'll talk, I had that on my slideshow earlier for a little bit later today because we're going to be talking even more about the Behavioral Health Council in the regular meeting. But yes, it is established in ORS and it is one of the requirements that we have as a community mental health program. For our 2024 recruitment, we had 7 open positions and we received 8 total applicants for those positions. One of our applicants was a returning member who served on our council for an extended period of time, and we had 6 applicants additional applicants, who submitted a letter of interest and or participated in one of our meetings beforehand, which is something that we typically do, where after we receive applicants, we invite folks to participate as guests to see how our council operates, to ask questions, and then to submit a letter of interest really about why they want to participate and the different strengths that they're bringing. All right. For this year's recommendations, we are recommending 3 different members at large to become members of our Behavioral Health Council. Those are Sally Reed, Ashley Marsh, and Veronica Gallegos Lozano. I'm going to read a brief kind of member bio on each of them just to provide a little bit of context. So Sally Reed is a Washington County resident who lives in District 1. She has a son who's participated in the behavioral health system and she's attended council meetings for actually several years now. Sally identifies as white and female on our application materials. Ashley Marsh is a new resident of Washington County and resides in District 4. She had the opportunity to participate in one of our meetings. She brought a lot of enthusiasm to our meeting as well. She's worked in social services and has the goal of entering the behavioral health field in Washington County. And Ashley identifies as white and female on her application materials. Finally, Veronica Gallegos Lozano is a behavioral health therapist who works at Kaiser Westside Hospital. Veronica does not reside in Washington County, but is a member of the business community and is engaged in our behavioral health system. Veronica identifies as female and Hispanic on our application materials. We have 2 behavioral health provider positions that we're recommending. Mary Monette for our child addictions provider position and Kimberly Kraus for our adult addictions provider position. And as a reminder to the board, we have our County Behavioral Health Provider Association actually make recommendations every year for the members of their association to be participating. And so they were both recommended by that association. Mary Monette is the president and CEO of LifeWorks Northwest, which is a behavioral health provider operating in Washington County. Mary has been a member of the council since 1995. She's an active participant and continues to be nominated by the Behavioral Health Provider Association each time. Her agency operates all the crisis services in our county, including the Cawthorn Walk-in Center. Mary identifies as female and white on her application materials. Kimberly Kraus is a program manager at Coda Inc., which is a provider of addiction services and will be the provider at CAT's Intensive Services Building as well. Kimberly is a resident of Washington County and lives in District 4. Kimberly attended our February meeting and had a chance to see how our council operates and was an active participant. She identifies as female and white on her application materials. This year, we received no applicants for our prevention position, so that's going to remain vacant for the next year or until we receive applicants in that position for that position. And we received one applicant for our family member of child recipient of services, Brian Decker, who we're recommending for appointment. Brian is an attorney working at the Oregon Justice Resource Center. Brian is a Washington County resident of District 1. He attended our February meeting and had a chance to observe how our meeting operates, and Brian identifies as male and white on his application materials. With that, that is the conclusion of the presentation.
Commissioners, do you have any questions? Everybody all ready to move forward with seeing these? The only question I had, and I can't remember if I also brought it up with the bylaws, I know I sent it in, was in the table in the packet, it uses the word citizen, and that's something in government we've moved away from. Is that something that can be changed through just the Granicus system that's used to track all this stuff and build these tables, as we've heard from staff, or do we have to take some action in order to do that?
I know I can absolutely add community member advocate on this, and I'll make sure to include that in the board materials that are submitted for the item on this on May 7th.
Terrific.
Yeah.
We're good to go. Thank you so much. All righty. Now we're going to move to a combination of public safety and behavioral health, and that's the deflection program planning. As we know, House Bill 4002 and then another House Bill 5423 provided for a new criminal justice system here related to uncontrolled substances. Is that what they're called? Yes, possession of controlled substances. So our team is here to tell us more about how they're moving forward to define a new system here in Washington County and seek funding for it. So welcome, team.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Harrington and Commissioners. As mentioned, I'm Erin Calvert, Assistant County Administrator. I'm joined by Marnie Kyle, another Assistant County Administrator, and it's my pleasure to reintroduce Joe Simich, who recently retired from Community Corrections as the Assistant Director and served Washington County for almost 38 years. And we're excited to bring him back. He agreed to return to be the temporary program manager to help us build the deflection program until we can get more permanent staff. Excuse me. Joe embodies a One Washington County, which is a perfect segue, as the chair mentioned, to join behavioral and public health and public safety. There's also many members of the deflection internal work group team in our audience today. Oh, Marnie, thanks. So the purpose of today's work session is to provide you with an update on House Bill 4002, what is required to implement a deflection program. We'll talk about the regular cadence for information flow and policy decision to your board. And we'd like to tell you about the internal work group planning and program development. The policy questions will center around whether your board is comfortable with the deflection program information that's received today. Do you think there's any information missing, and what decision points of the program design does your board want to provide? Next slide. Thanks, Marnie. House Bill 4002, as you know, was the result of the short session and built some structure and programming around the prior Measure 110. Out of the Oregon Behavioral Health Deflection Program Oversight Committee, Washington County was identified as an early adopter of deflection. And what that means is that we're eligible to receive 50% of the funding within 60 days of the governor signing the bill, which occurred on April 1st. Our county allocation for the deflection program for the remainder of the biennium is just over 1.3 million. And I'll just note for the board that at this point, we're feeling like that might not be enough funding, but we'll get into more about that. To unlock this funding, the county must complete or submit a short form application that's due April 23rd. And the goal, as you know, of this legislation is to divert individuals with substance use disorder away from the criminal justice system and into treatment. Okay, the Oregon Drug Intervention Plan chart, this may be familiar to you. It grounds us in a kind of a workflow generally. But as you might imagine, the role of the work group is really to work through what happens behind each of these blocks. It looks a little simplified, even though it's busy up there, it's pretty simple, but what we're realizing is the steps behind that and the details that are what we need to work through. That includes the roles and resources and more operational process. This plan is predicated on prevention and wraparound services to address root causes of substance use disorder. We are currently, the work group is spending most of the time in that white box on the left up into the blue area. So very simply, a law enforcement officer or deputy would cite someone for possession of a controlled substance or PCS and make a referral into the deflection program. No charges would be filed, there's no criminal record, and there's no public defender needed. And so this avoids that sort of contributing to the public defender crisis and the backlog in the courts. As I mentioned, we're working through the mechanics, but our hope is that the law enforcement officer would give the referral to the deflection program, and then we're working on what happens next. We know sometimes people get referrals and good resources and they may not make it there. So we're working on what that means to have a warm handoff or have somebody really help a person into treatment. And those are some of the details we're working through. You can even see in the red boxes, we're not spending our time there now, but it's just good to know that might look like what might be a more traditional court track. But even in that workflow, there's opportunities for treatment, for your record to be expunged, and for it's still predicated on the model of services and treatment and wraparound.
That's the diversion.
That's diversion, and that'll come at a later point. Next. Our goal with the board, of course, is always good communication to you and to our partners. We're finding our cadence to provide weekly written updates to your board. We'll have monthly board work sessions. We have them as placeholders now, but of course, if information comes up at a time we need to get into a work session, we'll make sure that we do that. And staff are updating the decision points in the board work plan so that you'll be able to see that on both the rolling agenda and the work plan and see how that flows throughout the year. Next. Okay, these are some key dates, kind of what we know as of today. It's not everything that's happening, but we are trying to just really elevate and highlight some of the dates. Last week on April 9th, the short form application was released by the Criminal Justice Commission, or CJC. On April 11th, Joe and other staff attended a webinar on what the grant application requirements are. It's a really simple short form. Today, April 16th, here we are in a board work session, and I just want to draw your attention that in your board business meeting, there will be you saw a consent item for 3 FTE, which I think Marnie will talk about in just a minute. And then April 23rd is when that short form application is due. May 1st is when CJC would distribute the contracts for signature. And then there's a TBD up here, and we sort of just put it into the timeline on what we're guessing would be when the longer application process drops and when we'll be applying for the next tranche of funding. We think that'll be a little bit more lengthy of a process or an application, but we'll keep the board updated as well. September 1st is the placeholder for launching a program. It's our goal. We don't have to be online and running on September 1st, but we cannot be online and running before September 1st. So it's a start goal for us.
That's the date that the new criminal what's the phrase? Or the legislation provides for some new criminal code. I'm not sure I got it right. And what day does it become effective?
Yeah, well, that's the September 1st date.
And it's called the criminal code?
Yes, it'll
Teach
become
me,
an
please.
unclassified misdemeanor.
Okay.
So
Yep.
right now it's not a misdemeanor. It'll
Sounds like it
raise
is
back
criminal
up.
code.
Yeah, I got it right then.
Yes, and then we've just noticed April and September of 2025. It's a reminder of when our 2 new resources, the Center for Addiction Triage and Treatment, are scheduled to be online. And we're so fortunate to have that resource in our county, but we we put it up here on the timeline just to show there is a gap of when September 1st, 2024 happens and when that resource will be available. So the team again is working on the resources in between.
Behavioral health workforce dependent.
Exactly. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Marnie.
Erin, before you move
Yeah.
on that slide, I did have a couple, maybe one question.
Yeah.
And slide number 3, I think you said 50% of the funding will be available within 60 days.
Correct.
And then the last slide, you were on that slide, April 9th, the short form application is to get that 60-day.
Correct. It's the first tranche. So it's really just being a formal process,
Oh,
putting a formal application.
Even though we qualify, it
Yes,
isn't, we still have
Yes.
to go
They're
through.
saying it sort of unlocks was their verbiage. It unlocks the funding for us.
And is that money allocated to come in May 1st or June?
Within 60 days of April 1st is when
Okay.
the governor signed. So
Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
we're waiting. Thank you.
Okay, as Erin introduced me, Marnie Kyle, I'm one of the ACAs. Happy to be here today. It's an exciting program that we're building and launching. One Washington County. It's really exciting and very happy to have Joe here to help us. As you've heard, the short application, which Joe is currently working on with the team, is due on April 23rd. And as Erin shared, in the last slide, CJC is planning to have a contract to us for review on May 1st. So that we can receive that funding hopefully in early June. Or the first application, as Erin kind of mentioned, is very high level. What you see on the slide is several of the application requirements that we'll need to address in this short form. So it's really about providing assurances that we're in the planning phase and that we are going to meet the requirements that are described in this slide, that we're going to have a program coordinator that's really helping us to work across departments and with our community partners, with other law enforcement organizations within the county, with cities. So really helping to facilitate and coordinate communication and working together. And we are working right now, as you'll see in a future slide, we are working on what individuals are eligible and how are we going to define success. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Talking about ensuring that the program is culturally and linguistically appropriate and that we're providing resources as needed for especially language and to assure access to all. And that we have some communication plans, again, for working together and working with our community partners and stakeholders. So we'll get into, so these are the deflection team members that are required in the state statute. And as you can see by the check marks in the first area of required, you can see that we're well on our way to pulling this team together and having a fabulous team that's going to meet the needs of the statutory requirements. We are identifying a behavioral health resource network, or what you see on there called BURN, which you've heard a bit about from Nick. So we're close to identifying a partner from the BURN, which is one of the requirements. And what you'll see on the right of the slide is a list of all of the BURN partners in Washington County. And we'll be working, through this liaison with all of our BURN partners. We're also looking at other members, such as a peer support organization member, and also looking at internal SMEs, like there's going to be points and times where we need county council, for example, to help us with some of the questions as we're working through exactly what this program will look like.
I understand that this is titled as required in statute. From my standpoint, it isn't sufficient to only have one law enforcement agency and knowing a little bit more about what's going on now, it's necessary but not sufficient to just have sheriff office patrol. We need to also be engaged with patrols from the cities here in our community, large, medium, and small, because of the fact that we want this to be a system that works here in Washington County. You also had a question, Commissioner Fye?
Not necessarily a question, Chair, thank you, but a comment. I really appreciated this slide. And the reason why I appreciated, it was really helpful because when the 4002 bill was being in discussion through all the iteration it went through, one of the things I kept hearing from all sorts of people was the idea that this needs to be in partnership and what that partnership should look like, and not necessarily that, you know, it should be heavily focused on law enforcement or it should heavily focused on this side, but it should be really a balance. And what I appreciated this slide is you demonstrate that balance, that, you know, it's up to us as a board to decide what the composition of required partners should look like. And I appreciate you giving me the option when we get to that decision level of deciding, you know, the partners and how do we design that program. We have options to choose from, and we already have some great partners that already work in Washington County. So thank you. I like this slide.
And Nico Cohen has been working with the burn partners to identify a partner that's, you know, willing and able. Right now we're doing weekly meetings. That's a lot to ask somebody to engage in, but so far it seems like they're all pretty excited and are looking forward to an opportunity to engage in this planning process.
Since you built the slide this way, could you also explain why you have the table over to the left and what it, or to the right, and what it conveys?
So we just thought it would be helpful for your board to see the current burn members, because the burn already exists. And this is the pool that we're looking for in partnership to pull actually somebody to be on our planning committee. But this is the group that we're required to work with as we develop this program.
But this slide also indicates funding. Is this funding that is provided specifically from the bill or from Measure 110 funding?
Thank you, Chair Harrington. So this slide shows funding that burn members are currently receiving. So from the state, this isn't related to the deflection bill. It's other behavioral health funding that they're receiving.
And I think this is a valuable point, and I'm glad you have the chart here, because the way the intention of deflection is expected to work across our entire county, our city council partners don't tend to have the same level of background about the behavioral health resource network that we do. So I think that I really appreciate how you're bringing this forward for more community understanding.
Yeah, no, thank you for pointing that out. The CJC grant doesn't directly fund behavioral health, but it assures that we're in partnership with behavioral health. So thank you for bringing that up.
Can we, before we leave that, so I am a little confused as to, now that you explained that chart, and that was, thank you for that question, Chair, because that was what I was thinking. We go back to the $1.3 million that we have to apply for the early, where does that, all that, what does that pay for? And I'm not understanding.
That's what they're going to figure out. It's funding to provide this new system
So it's the new system,
that'll be built on top.
partners on the left there, is that what we're
We'll
talking
give you
about?
some idea in the next few slides. So it's mainly, the short answer, it's going to provide funding for the staff that are needed to create and manage and implement.
So that is the next slide. I saw that, but I didn't know. And I looked at that and I thought, well, 1.3 million is not going to cover that bunch.
That's,
Nope. So we have a behavioral health system today. We're trying to get more of these individuals plugged into it. So we have this new deflection program that is being set up for connection to get people into our behavioral health system and not into the criminal justice system.
Right, I understand that. So go to the next slide, I think.
Well, this slide is just simply our current internal planning committee.
Oh, okay.
So
All
we
right.
just wanted you to know, and we know we have community corrections, HHS, the sheriff's office, Aaron and I from CAO, Julie McLeod from communications, Aaron, many of them, as Aaron said earlier, in the audience. And DA Barton is also on the planning committee, and we're very close to identifying who will be on there from the burn, and we've introduced Joe.
And John Cook is the undersheriff and Errol McCray. This is why I want to get this right. Are you the chief deputy for all of law enforcement, or did I get your title wrong? And that's why I'm asking, so I can be taught.
I'm chief deputy. But it's two chief deputies. I'm one of two.
Got it. Thank you very much for being here.
I have a question about the titling of this team, the implementation team. Is this not the sort of formation, or is this the implementers of the deflection is what you're referring to? And then I was gonna figure out if this is the implementation, where's the policy making? This is.
So this team, and Joe, you look like you want to jump in, but this team is really initially focused on the planning. What should this deflection program look like in Washington County? And we're going to go through some of the components that we're talking about. Many people on this team will be involved in implementation as well, because it's a brand new program. And so there's always going to be new policy questions, ideas, thoughts, because when you're planning something this new, we're looking at what a lot of our neighbors have done, what's been done in other cities, counties, but there's going to be things that we don't think about. But sorry, you wanted to.
Oh, no, I was gonna say much of the same. I mean, my focus here, and I'm only gonna be here until this program is really implemented. And hopefully then a more permanent program manager is in place, which is required by statute. So my focus is just getting this implemented, getting it going, answering a lot of those questions. And then ongoing, I would envision a deflection team that will continue to meet on some basis, but that team is yet to be formed.
Great questions. So I think Commissioner Willie, this starts to get at your question, but so we have identified what are our immediate needs to help build this program. And these are immediate needs because these are liaisons from the major departments that really need to help assure that we can continue to have representation at the table, and that can help us understand the different sectors. HHS is still learning about public safety and justice, and I think public safety and justice is still learning more about what services and opportunities we have within the behavioral health side. I think they know a lot about behavioral health because they're out there on the streets working every day, but they're learning more about what are the resources and paths to get people into the treatment.
Just to clarify, these are new positions.
Yes.
Okay.
These are new positions, and as Aaron mentioned, you will see them on your consent agenda. It's consent agenda number 12.
And these are funded by the 1.3.
Correct.
I just want,
Thank you.
Yes.
yeah, I'm just tying all this together.
Yep. And as you remember in the very first slide, Aaron talked about you were concerned about the level of funding. And so that's one of the important reasons that we have our wonderful Aaron Doyle, GR manager, to help us tackle what are some of the different routes to request more funding, because we're pretty sure we're going to need it. And then over time, as we develop and go through the planning, we will probably have additional staffing needs.
When do we get the second half? Did I miss that on your calendar here?
It's, they haven't given a date, but they're saying in the fall.
Okay, so they're not
all
gonna
of
hang
it.
us out
That's
for
the-
another year on this
That's
thing
the
or something.
TBD.
Right.
That's part of the TBD, correct?
That's
Application.
Oh, right here.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, I thought that was, really okay, never mind. I missed that date.
Okay, and then I want to start by saying this slide should say stakeholders and partners, because there are both stakeholders and partners within this group. But what we want to do is really support Chair Harrington in helping to assure that there's alignment and communication with the tri-county chairs, and so helping provide whatever information our chair needs for those meetings, as well as the chair mayor meetings and
Chair plus mayors, not chair
Oh.
or mayors.
thank you. Thank you.
triggered.
And then we'll make sure that Tanya has the information she needs to talk with city managers and special districts. We'll provide updates to your board, either written updates, or we'll request time on this work session agenda to provide updates for your board if things happen in between when we're that TBD date. And also to make sure that you're prepared for any PSCC engagement, that you have the information. And then we're also relying on the sheriff's office and staff to help us with updates for the law enforcement council. And then we learned yesterday from John under Sheriff Cook that there's also, and I probably don't have the name of this right, but there is also an operational group that will also be engaged in this conversation through John. And I think he said they meet monthly.
First time I've ever heard of a law enforcement council.
It's we met with them quite a bit during COVID and
I
with
think they're
some of the
convened
current
by the
plans.
sheriff and police chiefs
Yeah.
in the county.
Just like to make a comment here. This is I appreciate the updates. I appreciate the information. I'm really glad Julie's a part of this team because this is a community issue that I'm hearing about, a lot of questions and a lot of community interest. So these pieces are all extremely valuable to me as we move forward. So thank you.
We should probably also have noted on the slide that there will be additional community communication
Right.
along the way. Yeah.
Okay, so
You love all these questions.
yeah, you've got some questions, and these are just a handful of the questions that the planning team has been talking about and grappling with. Small committees meeting to bring back proposals, but things like who's eligible for the program. Is it possession of a controlled substance only, or could it also include other low-level crimes? And then how do we define success? Is it engagement with services? For how long are they engaged with services? Is it negative screenings? So grappling with all of those, including what does a failure mean? And then, one of the things that we're really keeping in mind is we know people aren't always successful the first time they enter into treatment. And so we're keeping that in mind so that it's not punitive if you don't progress perfectly in your first attempt at treatment.
I like I like it when it says who's eligible for the deflection. It sounds so much more positive than it could sound.
And with that, we would like to turn it back to your board for discussion. And we'd really like to hear from you. Are you comfortable with the information that you received today? Is there anything that we've missed that you're curious about or want to know about? And any thoughts that you want on at what decision points do you want to be engaged?
Okay, board, time to dive in.
I'll start with a couple of questions. One, since this is new, we're all trying to understand exactly what it is. And one of the early on questions was, do we even really want to be involved? And I think part of that was predicated on what's the cost and how we're going to do all this. There weren't a lot of sideboards that we understood how it was going to work. And for one, maybe the others are different, but I still don't think we fully understand it. I'm seeing a number of people, you're saying their new positions in 1.3, and you've already eaten up a good percentage of that just with administrative, and you haven't even provided a lot of services yet. So is there a on-off switch that you'd sit there and come back and say, there is no way in this green earth that we're going to be able to do this. It's going to cost you about 4 million. Is this board prepared to dive into its budget, find another 2 or 3?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Rogers. I'll start and then I'm sure these smart folks will have additions, but I think one of the things we're trying to do is build this program within our resources, and looking at, how wide are we going to start within our resources? The other thing, just a reminder that the behavioral health system is funded through other mechanisms. And so this funding isn't necessarily used to provide behavioral health clinical services. We are looking at things like navigators and how would that level of funding or level of assistance be funded? So we are looking at it. I think the short answer to did we come in with a thumbs up, we want to participate? From my perspective, it's 2 yeses. We want to get people the services so that they can overcome their substance use disorder, and the support that's needed for that. And we want to keep these folks out of the jail, if nothing else, just because of jail capacity. But I think also, of course, I'm Health and Human Services. I think it's the more humane approach to solving addiction. But other commissioners?
Yeah,
Go
I'm
ahead,
sorry.
you go ahead.
yeah.
No.
So we've got this gap in here until CAT opens. So that's one thing, and I know that's probably what you're working on now is what do we do with that? And then the second part is this program going to require us to modify what we anticipated the CAT program would look at?
Thank you, Commissioner Willie. Yes, there is a gap between September 1st or whenever we implement this program and the CAT. Nick is here if you want more detailed information, but we do have current resources. And just like we're looking at building this program in response to the budget that we have available, we're also thinking about the current resources and what can we take on. So we know, you all are very versed and there's a workforce shortage. It takes time to build these services, but we're really focused on what can we do with the resources we have now and what do we need to strive for in the future. Nick, if you want to add anything?
Well, and I think just to add on to that, I mean, I think we've all are in anticipation of CAT and that coming online and the services that's going to provide. And then we have this. And it seems like this is kind of an additional thing that we maybe didn't anticipate, but here it is. So we're prepared, but it is a modification a little bit of our initial program. Am I thinking about this correctly?
This is a modification as far as what a requirement is to be connecting folks to services. And when we're connecting them to services, we don't anticipate that this is going to necessarily change the structure or the services that are going to be delivered at CAT. CAT will continue to be a voluntary program. That we've heard that from the community, that we've heard it from our providers as well. And that's really what we've modeled all of our staffing against. And so what we will hope to be able to do is have that as a resource to be connecting folks in the deflection program to. Between now and then, we're going to be really leaning on the 19 providers that are a part of our behavioral health resource network today. We're going to be partnering closely with them. We're going to be partnering with other members of the treatment community as well, just to see how we really strengthen those pathways between when somebody is cited and when they are going to hopefully be connected with treatment successfully.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Treese?
It seems to me that this bridge between when deflection starts and when the CAT is operational, fully operational, we're still working with the base level of services that we have. So, but along this way, what a bright spot for me with the deflection program is that it's going to provide more information about who and when people will be referred to CAT. I recognize it's voluntary, but at the same time, we'll be able to see what that volume is going to look like. I would guess in a different way than we've been able to see it to date. Is that true?
Maybe I shouldn't move this chair
Maybe
back.
you
huh?
should just leave it
Um,
there. The resident smart guy.
I think this will absolutely give us data. And I think that we realize that we have a number of community members who are going to be accessing CAT completely outside of this program as well. But it's gonna show us some of the need in the community that we haven't necessarily seen through numbers over the last couple of years.
Well, and maybe this is Pollyanna side of me, but it also will inform what our workforce needs are going to be and help us grow that workforce as we get to the CAT, I would think. But that need may be absorbed by our burn partners and not necessarily be available for us. But that's my ongoing concern. I think others on the commission share that concern about workforce issues in relationship to the opening of the CAT. And thank you for this information. It's very helpful. It provides clarity about what's going on and what the next steps are. So it helps me in relationship to talking in my different roles to the public. So I appreciate it.
And connecting the dots. So this helped me a lot, start to put those together. So thank you.
I'll go next. I don't have questions. I'll hold to see what your answers are from the major planning consideration. I think the planning committee is really considering some really good questions here. And I'm really interested in what the answers is, all of them, but especially the process for deflection. I really think we can create something that works for everyone. I look forward to that and I'll give my feedback then. Thank you. I do have to take the call.
Thank you. So I have a few thoughts. As you've heard, I want to make sure that our city law enforcement are involved in this planning effort. And just expressing that, I have confidence that you'll follow through on that. I'm also looking for clarity before it launches to ensure that there are guidelines that are appropriate for the law enforcement patrol to utilize. And then also that we'll have some clarity before implementation on what training will be available for law enforcement personnel to receive, or when it's available, when you plan to have it completed in advance of the implementation date. And then another thing I think about is, as far as I know, we have the Adult Recovery Court here in Washington County, but there's also the Beaverton Specialty Court. They have the Behavioral Health Court and the Beaverton Sober DUII. And I want to make sure that the judge expertise is leveraged there. I don't know that that means being on the planning committee as opposed to being someone, a stakeholder you sit down with and see what expertise you can glean. I do know that you're planning on looking at data from patrol with drug interactions even prior to COVID. And I think that's good data harvesting. If we could go back to slide 6. I really appreciate that our staff is here early to explain how they're proceeding with planning. Okay. I think it's okay. No worries. it's really important for us to give feedback around, so what do we need in order to have their backs, to ensure that there's community confidence about how this new system will work. So that's why I want to bring us back to this slide. So our team is here today, both in work session to fill us in on how they're going about the planning, right? And we're going to be giving them the thumbs up in the business meeting. Yes, fill out that application. And then in the future, I'm going to go way out. Thank you for tolerating my arm visual. Then there's going to be this implementation. And what I want to make sure that you all have given an idea today about, I would like to see that we have some interaction between that implementation date, right? And how the planning is going, so that we can do our part as the board in checking in on who's been involved, how's the community communication going, so that we can have the teams front, back, centers, sides before they launch. I don't know exactly where that point is, okay? We do know that for that second tranche of funding, I'm making the assumption that that set of funding will, in addition to what remains from the first tranche, help with the implementation costs, because this full 1.3 million is what we have for this biennium, right? So the remainder of 24, all of 25 through June 1st of 26. So I don't know myself if that's just one touch point or two. So I just wanted to share that I think for us, we're going to need at least one. They've penciled in these work sessions. From my standpoint, I imagine just 2 check-ins, and am perfectly willing, more than happy to wait and trust their expertise to see when those 2 touch points seem to make sense. And don't feel the need to say, well, it needs to be specifically, discreetly here or there. So, because there are a lot of variables, a lot of questions we need them to explore. So I guess I'm speaking in terms of a framework for success versus something discrete. Is that reasonable? Is that coming across?
Yep.
Okay.
If I could add to that, as you were talking about our check-in points and about how this is going to work, I'm reflecting a little bit on our housing situation, on our SHS situation, and I really want to make sure that our story and what the work that we are doing is well positioned, because we don't have any guarantee what the other regional players will be doing.
Yeah.
And I just want to take the learnings that we've had here and make sure that we're preparing ourselves to tell our story and what's happening in Washington County, because so often it gets it gets subsumed by other negative stories in the region. So just kind of an awareness point for me.
I have one more quick question. It's a lot more fun than what you guys were talking about. It's about numbers. So it's hard. It just, June 30 just is kind of coming at us like a train, and then we flip to a 24-25 budget, which is hard to get that in here anyway. I'm not ready to do that yet, but
Well, hurry up, Val.
that means I'm gonna
You
get.
have till
I
April
got birthday.
29th. Get ready.
Having said all of that, so we've got basically 2.7 coming to this, with first half of 1.3 something. and
No,
second half-
no, 1.3 total.
Okay, So the 1.3 is going to be in the budget that we are considering coming up. Have we got that far into this process? So it's going to be incorporated in it?
It's not in the current proposed budget, but we've been talking to Greg about different approaches to adding it to the budget, whether it's done during the budget committee process or
Or a supplemental that we do
Yeah, I was
usually in
thinking of
September.
Yeah, okay. I
Yeah.
just wondered if there was
Yeah.
someplace I could go to look at that when we get our budget document. but-
Let me put a finer point on it and take you back to last year's budget. We learned through the session more information on medical examiners, and that information was not included in the proposed budget. However, we addressed that during the budget committees. If we have adequate information, that same process would be used with deflection. If it is not the appropriate time, then we can still work through a supplemental process. So those would be the two paths.
All right, I just wanted to make sure not to look for this and then.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Okay, well, that's it from the board. Thank you again, and we'll look forward to the updates along the way and really appreciate the team following up on all these plans. It's a great team, and we're fully confident in the work you're going through. Thank you. All righty, we will pause our work session here, reconvene in our business meeting, and come back time certain 1 p.m. with a presentation from Greater Portland, Inc.